the perfect organism. Its structural perfection is matched only by its hostility. I admire its purity. A survivor, unclouded by conscience, remorse, or delusions of morality. This is how the xenomorph from the movie Alien was described. It was an alien creature that evolved inside a human being, feeding on his life juices. And then, it burst out. It was the scariest horror movie in 1979. Watch it if you haven't seen it. Nowadays, though, such horror stories are not likely to scare anyone. Sometimes it's kind of funny. What if I told you it was almost a documentary? And many of you already carry such aliens in your bodies. You'll watch this video with your mouth open, and I wouldn't recommend putting anything in that mouth. Because you've seen the title of the video, you've probably seen the picture, and by clicking on the video, you've signed an agreement that the contents of your stomachs are not our responsibility. So, are you ready? Then look at this saint. This is Saint Roch, the patron saint of the sick, pilgrims, and surgeons. But what's that wound on his leg? Is that pus leaking out? No, it's the parasitic guinea worm. It popped out to give offspring. This is the earliest depiction of it, and it causes a rare but very bad disease, dracunculiasis. Yeah, the word is the same root as Dracula, all right. And it translates from Latin as little dragons. And that's the reason why you absolutely mustn't drink standing water in Africa that looks like this, for example. The guinea worm enters the body with the little crustaceans. Right in the stomach, the male mates with the female and dies, and the female moves into the leg, grows up to a couple of feet in length, and doesn't show up for 1 year. So there's a couple of feet long, white thread living inside you, and you don't even notice it. The immune system doesn't see it either because it cheats it. Like other parasites, it doesn't cause any problems until it has babies, larvae. During this period, the worm crawls under the skin and starts picking at it, sort of saying, "Knock knock, let me and my babies out." The infected person runs to the water from the burning pain to cool the ulcer. And it's a trap. That's just what the parasite needs. In the water, it tears the skin, releases the larva, and the worm's life cycle begins again. Because of the intolerable burning pain, the parasite is given the name Little Dragon. It's possible to get rid of these dragons, but only one way. To pull them out mechanically, you need to pour water onto the wound so that the worm comes out of its lair, and then slowly reel it in on a stick or bandage until it comes out. This can take weeks because if the worm tears, it'll either hide under the skin or it will die and begin to decompose right in the body, and that is already dangerous. According to one version, it was the procedure of taking the worm out that gave rise to the symbol of medicine, the rod of Asclepius. So perhaps it's not a snake, but a worm. In general, most people carry parasites inside them right now. And I'm not talking about viruses and bacteria. I'm talking specifically about parasites, and not just people. Almost any animal right now carries a parasite and feeds it, and not just one species, but several at once. In the famous game Plague Inc., you could select the type of pathogen. Yes, there are superbacteria and deadly viruses, which are quite crucial, but now we're going to talk about the most sophisticated enemy of all living beings, the parasites. Is it going to be disgusting? Yes, it is. But sometimes you have to let go of squeamishness to understand how the world works. For example, how parasites drive evolution and even make us have sex. Yes, and there are studies like that, and we'll talk about them. Whoa! Holy cripes! There's even research out there. Thank you so much. I'm talking about sex. There's more. You're about to find out what kind of parasites the dinosaurs had, why slugs shed their entire bodies at once, how parasites made zebras striped and accustomed the English to tea and gin and tonic, how a feline parasite in the brain makes us risky. Are there parasites in the parasites themselves? Why scientists produce GMO mosquitoes? Why snails pierce each other with love darts? What the great battle between Chinese and sparrows led to? How killer wasps will replace our insecticides? And whether we should finally get rid of all the creatures inside us. Yup. Eon. In the 19th century, parasitology was considered the dark, dirty side of biology. in the sense that few people wanted to look through guts getting worms out. For Charles Darwin, parasites were just another proof that there is no God. He said, "I cannot persuade myself that a beneficent and omnipotent God would have designedly created parasitic wasps with the express intention of their feeding within the living bodies of caterpillars." What made that impression on the scientist? These parasitic wasps. Cute little creatures, aren't they? You know what they're doing right now? Think they're walking on a leaf after lunch? They're searching the leaves for a bioincubator for their babies. A fat unicorn caterpillar like this would do just fine. All it does is eat and get fat, but it won't be long. The wasp has already stuck its ovipositor into the soft tissue and is transplanting 100 of its eggs into it. The caterpillar naturally does not like this, and its immunity immediately rushes to the attack. But the wasp provided for everything. Together with the eggs, it injects the victim with a virus that hacks and disables its immune system. Now nothing prevents the larva from eating the still living caterpillar from the inside and hanging out their cocoons. What's interesting is, they don't touch any vital organs and keep the host alive for as long as it takes for them to develop. Who's the host here after all? Only after they emerge from the cocoon and fly away is the caterpillar allowed to go to caterpillar heaven. After all, it is a good caterpillar. A martyr caterpillar. No wonder, right, that such impudence struck Darwin? Because he'd been building a beautiful and coherent theory of evolution. I mean, survival of the fittest, right? No. It's not the strongest that survives, but the most adapted. And you can adapt in different ways. You can spend millions of years enhancing your eyesight, developing sensitive hearing, growing thick fur or powerful muscles. Or you can do something like this woodlouse. Swim into fish gills, suck on its tongue, and when it dries off, attach your body in place of it and become a tongue yourself. It's hard to believe, but the fish uses the woodlice as a normal tongue while it quietly sucks blood out of it. But how is this different from the work of a normal tongue? Because it also receives blood and helps to chew food, except that this tongue also mates with males right in the mouth. So it's not a kiss with tongue, but sex with tongue inside a huge mouth. It's not a surreal picture, it's true. Well, artists, now you got some new ideas. Parasitism is such an evolutionary shortcut. You just use ready-made conditions. And what, you can go on living a passive life, Like those who didn't move out of their parents' house at 30? No. Only stupid parasites do that, and people. The more cunning ones hold power over their host. Hold control. Seizing power over their nervous system. Even if they themselves don't have a sign of a brain. Welcome to the world of parasitic manipulators. Here is a cordyceps, a fungus that turns an ant into a zombie, makes it climb higher and cling to a leaf with its jaws, and then sprouts right out of its head to spread the spores further. This is the kind of cordyceps fungus that started the zombie epidemic in the Last of Us universe. And here's the worm that causes crickets to dive in water, to then come out of them as a tangled knot. Those crickets that didn't drown, by the way, survive. And here's the worst part. Another worm with an abnormal name, I won't even try to pronounce it, which gets into a snail from bird droppings, grows in it, then moves into its eye stalks, and starts pulsating so that the host gets eaten by the bird and the loop closes. Yeah, the bird has to see those eye stalks. It's like landing lights for birds. Like, land and eat me! Yes, they poke their eyes out and just eat their heads. That's aggressive marketing. This is all amazing, yes, but how does a parasite communicate with its host? Do they hear voices in their heads? How do they make them do anything? Parasites communicate in the language of hormones and neurotransmitters. Carriers feel something like an instinct to climb a tree or jump in the water and turn into just bioincubator zombies. But even among parasites, there are those who are willing to sacrifice everything for a well-fed life, even if they have to degrade themselves. This is a saculina, not to be confused with suckers. It's born a normal barnacle. It's got a head, a mouth, a tail, legs, everything. But instead of growing into something adult, conscious, learning to get food, paying bills, building its own territories, saculina screws itself into a crab, another crab, and quickly degrades. It loses its legs, its tail, and even its mouth. Instead, it grows tendrils that, like roots, penetrate the crab's entire body and sucks the nutrients out of it, yet gives him pleasure. It really looks like it gives the crab a blowjob, in the sense that the Sakulina hangs just in the bikini area, where the crab usually carries its offspring. It stops shedding, growing, and regrowing its lost limbs. Its only purpose now is to serve the parasite. Sakulina castrates the crab. It can never have children again. That's it. In a genetic sense, it becomes a zombie. While the rest of the crabs are mating, fighting, socializing, running away from people who yell, "Look, crabs, crabs!" It's busy with only one thing. It eats. It has no children, but its love and care have not disappeared, and it directs all his maternal instincts to the parasite. The crab carefully cares for it, scraping off algae and fungi as if it were its own child. For this, the parasite rewards it with chemicals. Imagine, your body is deformed, castrated, yet you are happy because you've given life to a new creature. Even though it will soon come and enslave your relatives and friends, you are just a bodily shell of a parasite. You lie on the sand, look up at the sky, and think that life is good. Yes, it is, but not yours. So what does it mean? Parasitism is the best evolutionary strategy? Yeah? You crawl into someone else's body, take advantage of them, play with their biochemistry, and that's it, and life is good? Not always. Do you think you won't get outplayed? You won't be destroyed? You will be destroyed, just like that poor Cynopoidea. It thinks it's outsmarted everyone by laying its eggs in the bark of an oak tree. Her babies will feed and grow up in peace and quiet. When they grow up, they gnaw through the bark and fly away, leaving holes like this. But not all of them manage to get out. Some get stuck in the passage, and it's like they're being eaten from the inside by an alien, because they really are. This alien is Uterus Set, named after the Egyptian god of evil and chaos, Set. And it's a wasp, too. Set lays eggs in the Cynopoidea and makes it gnaw a hole that's too small. In an attempt to get out, the insect just gets stuck like freaking Winnie the Pooh. That's it. At this point, Set chews through it from the inside and gets out through its head. What a sophisticated strategy. When one parasite uses another, it's called superparasitism. In other words, this is a kind of turducken of manipulation and subjugation. Essentially, one being uses another, like a drill for wood, or a canteen for its children. Could you use or even think of such a strategy? But a little bug could. I think it's now clear to you how much an animal is motivated to get rid of parasites, and it's time to find out how they do it. The easiest way is to escape. Hide. Run away. Take to your heels. Take off. Hit the road. Get the fuck the way deer do it. It looks something like this. Deer run away as a herd from botflies and horseflies and immigrate to the north, where there are no parasites. Another way is to hide in the water, as hippos do, or wag tails like cows. But there is a more cunning way, to let other animals clean you off. Well, yes. Why? They're parasites to you, but food to them. See, the warthog does not attack mongooses. On the contrary, it lies down and calmly lets the mongoose get into its ears. That's because the mongoose cleans its body of insect parasites. Does this remind you of anything, by the way? Yeah, Timon and Pumbaa in real life. I know Timon was a meerkat, not a mongoose, but they're from the same family. Yeah, screenwriters in general often take situations from life. It's normal, so mongoose, meerkat. The screenwriter himself might not understand what's a mongoose and what's a meerkat. Okay, but parasites. How else can you fool them? Use optical illusions. And yes, who do you think I'm talking about? A chameleon? Or a cuttlefish, for example? I'm talking about zebras. The contrasting stripes only make it more visible to the predators in the savannah. It's a real anti-camouflage. Then why make life so difficult for yourself? To get rid of another danger. Gadflies and tsetse flies, which spread disease. The whole point is that insects find it harder to land on striped surfaces. They just bump into them. Scientists decided to prove this and put a striped coat on a horse. Striped horses fell victim to gadflies 10 times less often. This trick doesn't work with a black or white cover, only with a striped one. The insects crash into it at full speed and bounce the hell off of it. It's like makeup that breaks the facial recognition system. Only in our case here, it breaks the landing system. Of course, zebra stripes could have other uses, for example, thermoregulation. But now, you have a quick answer, in case your kid asks you about this. Daddy, why do zebras have stripes? So they don't get bitten, Sonny. Any other questions? No, Daddy. Go get me a beer then. This is surprising, but there's a more radical way to get rid of parasites. Oh, much more radical. Are you ready? Here we go. When the Elysia slug feels that it's got some parasites, it just sheds its entire body. Yeah, it's not a fake. Here's the head, and here's the body it was attached to a minute ago. The heart, kidneys, intestines, and sex organs are all left in the body aside. Then what does this head feed on? Photosynthesis, like plants. Yes, the slug doesn't digest some of the chloroplasts and algae it eats, but embeds them in its tissues so that they supply it with energy when the sun shines. So the slug's head is literally powered by solar panels. Such a radical detox. Only, instead of toxins, you're getting rid of your own body. And while a new one grows, you turn into a photosynthetic flower. That's something lizards who drop their tails wouldn't even dream of. Speaking of lizards, parasites have been around for so long that even dinosaurs had them. For example, this is an almost inch-long Jurassic flea that lived in the dinosaur's feathers. Yes, today we know that many dinosaurs had feathers. Parasites appeared a long time ago. When? We don't know when, but we do know at least 223 cases of free-living animals turning into parasites. That's how profitable it is. So parasites are probably as old as life itself. But they certainly haven't come across animals like us, because we don't need to discard our bodies or wag our tails. We have medicine, don't we? Yes, but unlike viruses and bacteria, there are almost no vaccines against parasites. Simply because you can't get them to reproduce in a petri dish. They don't fall for that. They want a live host. There are almost no vaccines, but there are drugs, and some of them are so scary that you don't want to inject them into yourself unless you have no other choice. These are trypanosomes. These babies cause sleeping sickness, and in addition to drowsiness, they cause fever, coma, and then death. And you have to be treated with millarceprol. This drug consists mostly of arsenic dissolved in propylene glycol. It's essentially arsenic in antifreeze. It's so corrosive that it can dissolve the IV tubing, but if it leaks from the vein to the outside, it turns the flesh into a painful mass. It's like alien's blood, only it flows through your veins. 1 in 20 patients die from such a treatment, but without the treatment, almost everyone dies. So it's the lesser of two evils. Sleeping sickness affects tens of thousands of people on the planet, but it's nothing compared to the greatest enemy of mankind. Malaria. Malaria? That's some scare story from the past, isn't it? But it's not. From the past, you just don't hear about it. But let me remind you, it affects 500 million people a year. And mosquitoes are the cause. And those fantastic beasts you can find in them. Look at this big guy. I'm sure you've seen one at home. Some people think it's a malaria mosquito, but it's not. It's a crane fly. It doesn't want your blood, it eats plant nectar. It doesn't even have anything to bite you with. This is the real malaria mosquito. It's almost indistinguishable from an ordinary mosquito, but its proboscis is a real Swiss knife. It has 6 needles, 2 of them to cut the skin, the other 2 to move it apart. Through one it drinks blood as through a straw, and through the 6th it injects the anticoagulant. But sometimes it leaves you the gift. Plasmodium malariae. Plasmodium. Whoa! Yeah? Something from the future with a plasma weapon? But it's actually a simple single-celled organism that lives in the blood cells and is partly a subtle manipulator of both mosquitoes and humans. They force a person with malaria to emit an odor that attracts mosquitoes, and the latter are attracted to it and bite. Once inside the insect, the plasmodia mate and reproduce. At this time, they absolutely do not need the mosquito to eat, because if someone swats it, this whole ship of genes will go down, and this is not something the plasmodium wants. So the plasmodium turns off its host's appetite. But, over time, The parasite has babies that gather in the mosquito's salivary gland, and its priorities change. Now, the plasmodium turns on its appetite and keeps the blood from clotting, so the mosquito rushes around like crazy, trying to bite more and more people, spreading malaria. If only there were a 100% way to protect yourself from malaria, to be immune to it. Yeah? Yeah, there's a way. Just get sickle cell anemia. It's a mutation in which the blood cells form the wrong hemoglobin, which doesn't carry oxygen well and causes the cells to change shape and stick together right in the blood vessels. As a result, organs slowly suffocate and a stroke can occur. Don't like it? The malarial plasmodium doesn't like it either. It can't exist in a sickle cell. So people with defective hemoglobin have no problem with malaria. They're immune. According to the law of evolution, this gene should have been eliminated due to unsuitability. Well, we don't need it anymore, but it persists in those populations, in those countries where malaria is raging. Look, here's a map of the spread of anemia, and here's a map of the incidence of malaria, predominantly in the equator. The most prominent sites of these diseases coincide. What do we end up with? What makes you weaker in one thing can make you stronger in another. We remember that it's not the strongest who survive, but the most adapted. That's how humans have adapted to malaria. Yes, it's a shaky, flaky compromise, but it's there nonetheless. What if I told you that half of you are carrying parasites inside of you right now? And they're not somewhere in your leg or in your gut, but right in your brain. And it's all because of cats. I'm not joking. The US has the highest cat population among all other countries. There are about 74 million of them in the country. This is quite impressive. So what? What's the big deal? Cats. They're so cute. How can you not touch them? Not stroke them, not feed them, not smell them, not kiss them on the nose? How? Yeah, I agree with you. You can't. You have to live with it. And with Toxoplasma too, because it's the cats that it chose as its main freaking home. This is also a protozoan, a relative of malarial plasmodium, but it reproduces only in cats. And it can spend the other part of its life in any warm-blooded animal, such as a mouse, but only to move back into the cat afterwards. And in normal life, mice avoid meeting cats. Yes, we know that. The smell of cat urine alone can make them stressed, want to run away, and even the embryos in a pregnant mouse can dissolve. Holy crap. The body sort of tells them, honey, it's not time to give birth. It's time to get the hell out of here. But everything changes when the toxoplasma gets into their brain and causes it to secrete dopamine on purpose, so that the mice become fearless and they start exploring around and become easy prey for cats. Okay, but what does this have to do with us humans? I mean, in today's world, cats rarely eat people. But that's not really necessary. All it takes is petting a cat and then biting off a burr on your finger. That's enough for the toxoplasma eggs to enter the body and begin moving slowly to the brain. Cat litter boxes are especially dangerous to clean, as they contain the parasite. Remember a mild cold you had when you were 6 years old? Maybe that's when the toxoplasma got to your brain. There's no need to panic. Toxoplasma won't hurt you. It's just curled up and waiting peacefully in your brain for the next cat. A beaver builds a dam. A bird builds a nest. And parasites build cysts like this. They hide inside the cells, so the immune system can't see them, but they can't get out of the cysts either, so they go into hibernation mode. For Toxoplasma, the human body is a dead end. But it still doesn't give up on trying to manipulate humans, like a mouse. Do they manage to do that? It depends. Depends on gender. Men start taking more risks, and they have more chances, for example, to get into a car accident. And women become more sociable and responsive. But it makes both enterprising, anxious, and neurotic at the same time. And there's frightening evidence that the extra dopamine from toxoplasma increases the chance of developing schizophrenia. Remember the crazy cat lady from The Simpsons? Maybe she's crazy because of toxoplasma. Okay, I don't want to scare you. The latest research suggests that insanity from cats is greatly exaggerated. Here's what's proven for sure. Toxoplasma is dangerous for AIDS patients, and oddly enough, for pregnant women, because the parasite can enter the child's brain through the placenta and harm the brain while it's just forming. So pay attention. If you're pregnant, slowly put the cat on the floor, push it off with your foot, and go wash your hands! Now, Let's take our minds off the worms in our asses and the various brain abnormalities and talk about the most unobvious influence of parasites, and about how parasites affect our culture and traditions. People in England had been drinking coffee for almost 400 years. It used to be imported at great expense from the Netherlands. But then the British took over Ceylon, now Sri Lanka, and turned it into one solid coffee plantation. There was so much coffee and it was so cheap that even the poor could afford it. All until the coffee trees slowly began to rust. This is what it looks like. It's actually not rust at all, but a fungus. It came from neighboring islands and completely destroyed the coffee trees on Ceylon. The island, which could supply half of Europe with coffee, stopped producing the coffee cherries entirely. The British needed something to replace coffee, so they cut down all the coffee trees and changed them to tea plantations. The nation went from coffee to tea because of a fungus. So the parasites created a new British tradition of tea drinking at 5 o'clock. It was also there that the British were introduced to a new disease to them: malaria. They knew there was one preventative measure: the bark of the cinquefoil tree. But it was bitter, and they decided to mix it with soda, sugar, and water. This is how the tonic appeared, and of course the English began to dilute it with their favorite gin. And that's how the famous gin and tonic appeared. You understand? The British combined pleasure with utility. So should we drink gin and tonic to fight malaria? It's not so simple. Modern tonic has so little quinine that you'd have to drink 67 liters of the cocktail to get protection. And now, the most off-the-wall hypothesis: it may have been the parasites that made us have sex. Wait, what? It's very simple. Reproduction mixes up the genes, and it's harder for parasites to hack the host. Here's an example. Many snails are hermaphrodites. Each has male and female glands, and they can fertilize their own eggs, but some also have love darts. These are a kind of needles, and they're called so for a reason. Snails pierce their partner with them to inject their sperm. But why the hell go to all that trouble when you can do it yourself, and you don't have to pierce anybody at all? It's all about the parasites. When there are lots of them, it's love dart season for snails. Sexual reproduction mixes up the genes, and instead of an army of clones, we get a brood of new offspring, each of which, although similar to us, is unique in its own way. Parasites are very finely tuned. They can no longer use the old mechanisms and have to invent new ones. And animals are constantly evolving to get rid of parasites. Such an arms race is called the Black Queen hypothesis, the one from Alice in Wonderland. She said, "We must run as fast as we can just to stay in place." The same with evolution. You see, right? Only you've adapted to the climate and nature, and it would seem that everything is fine. You can relax. But no. The parasites have adapted to you, and you need to evolve again. Parasites put tremendous pressure on animals from the inside, while predators press from the outside. Between this hammer and anvil, life evolves and becomes more complicated. What should we humans do? I don't want to wait 1,000,000 years to get rid of parasites. I want to get rid of them right here and now. Yes, there have been a lot of horror stories in this video. The worms in the gut and in the leg, plasmodia in the blood. Fortunately, in the last half-century, mankind has made a huge leap in the fight against parasites. If in the 40s the guinea worm popped out of the leg of 48 million people every year, in 2016 this number changed to 25 people. Not millions, just 25 people. Why did things change so much? The natives were taught to build wells, to filter water through gauze, and not to jump into the swamp when the worm crawls out of their legs. So, the life cycle of the parasite was interrupted in 2 places at once. Ordinary filtered water helped to defeat the little dragons, and the common mosquito nets helped to defeat malaria. But scientists have a better plan. Some time ago, they released thousands of genetically modified mosquitoes from such boxes in Florida. Their genes contain a fatal bug, the gene for mosquito infertility, which they pass on to their offspring, and in 10 generations, the entire population will be extinct. What a smart thing to do, right? Mosquitoes are biological weapons that shoot at their own. Hopefully it won't end up like when the Chinese declared war on sparrows. They said the sparrows were eating their grain, so they decided that the whole nation would shoot the birds with slingshots, beat drums, and wave all sorts of things to keep them from sitting down so that they would die of exhaustion. It was a great battle with the sparrows. The sparrows were defeated. And in the early years, there really was more grain. But then in the absence of predators, caterpillars and locusts, which also love grain, multiplied. As a result, tens of millions of people died of starvation, and the sparrows had to be imported from the USSR. Parasites can be as much a part of the ecosystem as birds. Then maybe stop fighting them and smoke the peace pipe. For example, we've done this with the bellyworms. Yes, they've lived with us for millions of years, and the immune system has adjusted to them. Now for the immune system, they're a norm. Except that in a world of filtered water and sanitizers, our intestines are more empty than ever, and the immune system, left without a worthy goal, arranges a friendly fire against the cells of the native body. In multiple sclerosis, it attacks myelin and nerve cell sheaths. In rheumatoid arthritis, it attacks synovial membranes. And in patients with type 1 diabetes, it hits the crucial cells of the pancreas. All of these people suffer wildly. Scared of getting worms inside yourself? Yeah, I understand. But we used to think of bacteria as definitely bad too, and now we drink yogurt with bifidobacteria in the hope that some of it will stay in our intestines. People domesticated dogs and horses, cats. Well, why not domesticate, for example, parasites? It's not as hard as it sounds. Here's one example. Wasps, flies, and other parasites used to kill caterpillars, beetles, and other pests. But in the 40s, there was a revolution. Mankind invented DDT. It was the latest achievement of science, a synthetic poison that destroyed all insects. This poison was literally sprayed over the fields, except that after killing insects, it doesn't decompose, but accumulates in the animals that eat it, and then in people, causing cancer. For this reason, DDT was suggested to be called not an insecticide, but a biocide, because it destroyed not only insects, but in general all living things. And it wasn't just it. Most of the dirty dozen of banned organic substances are pest control chemicals. So, maybe it's time to stop using chemical weapons against them and switch to biological weapons. That's exactly what was done in the 80s in Kinshasa, the capital of Zaire. To fight the mealybugs, they bred wasps, which were parasitic for them, and then literally threw them from an airplane. The wasps began to lay their eggs in the mealybugs, and after a year, the problem was solved. And the enemy of my enemy is my friend, isn't he? Parasites are very finely tuned weapons, and if there's even one plant in the field with mealybugs, the wasp will find it. You need to use pesticides for plants every year, but the parasites multiply on their own. Scientists estimate that half of all animal species are parasites. So it turns out, this is our world, you could even say our inner world, that we've just begun to study. Parasites can scare us. When the alien bursts out of the actor's chest, we realize that nature itself is breaking through to us, to give humanity a kick in the ass for being too arrogant. But think about it. There is nothing unequivocally bad or unequivocally good in the ecosystem. Everything is in balance. Parasites have indeed influenced our history and influenced our evolution. Perhaps without them, we would look and function differently altogether. But now I'm thinking, is it just me talking? Or is the toxoplasma sending signals to my brain? After all, I'm quite a pussy lover. Either way, pump your brains. Bye.